please put your hands together for Maciej Cegłowski.
I hate to be negative, but this is potato vodka, and I asked for wheat, but whatever. This is a picture of me, what is it, 4 years ago, when I first started Pinboard, the site that some of you may use, and it's really nice to see not just the Yahoo reunion, but a lot of Pinboard people here. This is me in the early 2009. I'm standing on a balcony in northeastern Romania, the poorest county in the European Union, but with really good internet. And even though I'm smiling, it's kind of having a tough time. For one, I'm $50,000 in debt. I also don't have a job, and I am suddenly running out of contracting work because the economy, as you remember, has exploded. So little did I know, though, that this rainbow was actually the real thing, and that in just a few months, Pinboard was going to take off. And next month, it's going to be 4 years since I worked for anybody else, which is amazing and wonderful. And of course, it makes me anxious. I want to keep going because I'm having a really good time, and this is the thing I've dreamed of all my life. But bookmarking services have like a 4-year lifespan usually, so I've been really nervous. And so I went and I started, thinking about this, and I was rereading this book that had such a formative effect on me when I was younger. About that kind of lit the fire for being self-reliant and kind of paving my own way. And to my great joy, the book was even better than I remembered. It was. I had been too young and too callow to understand half of it, and so I I want to talk today about one of my personal heroes, someone who changed my life and who I think is really, worth listening to. Whoop, sorry. Long slide. Easy. Gonna be a long 20 minutes. Henry David Thoreau. If you weren't forced to read this guy in high school, Henry David Thoreau was a content creator, active in the 1850s. He's most famous for a book called Walden, where he built himself a house in the woods, and as an experiment in trying to live minimally, spent 2 years there and then wrote it up. You see he's got a neckbeard going on. Louisa May Alcott wrote about this neckbeard. It will most assuredly deflect amorous advances and preserve the man's virtue in perpetuity. And she wasn't wrong. But discovering the contraceptive properties of the neckbeard was not the only way in which Thoreau was ahead of his time. He was a locavore, a pescatarian, do-it-yourselfer. He liked to wander around Concord in camouflage because it made it easier to spot wild animals, practiced yoga, played the flute. In short, he would fit right in Portland, I think. And so I want to present to you kind of my gritty reboot, what I'm calling Thoreau 2.0. I think I saw that guy. Anyway, but I have there's a content warning with this talk. Thoreau is a really good writer, and he's really quotable. And sometimes when people are very quotable, it can interfere with actually listening to what they're trying to say. Walden is a complicated book. He wrote like 8 drafts of it. It's very subtle, and you can't like go in and just strip mine it for Tim Ferriss-style life hacks. But in the interest of time, I've strip mined it for some Tim Ferriss-style life hacks that I'll present to you in a bulleted list. So the first life hack, most famous quote from Thoreau is simplify, 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 which I like to paraphrase as simplify. Thank you. I too have a literary bent. You see that this is a facsimile because his own cabin has a funny history that I'm not going to go into. But he basically lived like this and wrote about it. And I don't have to preach the virtues of simplicity, to this crowd. It's been really nice to see, it catch on in interfaces and become the accepted norm. But Thoreau was a little bit. He had something else in mind. The way that like complex things can sneak into our lives almost adversarially. So he is the example of a farmer who, thinking that he needs to eat meat in order to have strength, will then buy that meat, which costs a lot of money. He has to till more land in order to earn that money. And of course, tilling the land makes him hungrier. So it kind of, there's a spiral of needs. And meanwhile, the ox that's pulling his plow eats vegetable matter and is stronger than the farmer will ever be. So I thought that was a neat idea, and I kind of had my own run-in with this parable. 3 years ago, I was leaning over and I watched my telephone as it slowly spiraled into a bucket of mop water. For whatever reason, it's 2013, but water is still kryptonite to any electronics, instantly destroys them. And partly out of curiosity, 15%, partly out of laziness, 85%, I didn't replace the phone. And I was delighted to see that I actually didn't miss it that much. It was fine not to have it. But there's a follow-on effect too. Without a phone, there was no way if something happened on Pinboard that I could be notified and woken up to deal with it. It disturbed me at first, but then I realized, I don't want to be waking up at 2:30 a.m. Because of a loud noise and then immediately going into a root console and doing something on the site. It's not going to end well for my users or me. But there was an even further follow-on. The fact that there was no way I could possibly notify that disaster had happened made me sleep better, because nothing's going to wake me up. So this thing that was a convenience actually had this whole pyramid of anxiety on it that I was not even aware of. I'm not telling you to get rid of your cell phones necessarily, but I do like this idea of complexity sneaking into our lives and having to actively fight it, almost like it's roaches or something. Okay, so the thing with life advice is it's really trite, right? Because everybody's heard it since it's good advice, and it's hard to follow, or it wouldn't be advice in the first place. So some of these are going to be trite, but I hope you'll bear with me. Know yourself is an obvious one. Thoreau's problem was that he was an ecologist and a nature writer at a time before those categories existed, and partly because he helped invent them. But from his perspective, it meant that even his closest friends and admirers saw him as a wasted talent. He was a really gifted writer who was wasting his time picking huckleberries. And I think this is an important lesson for us because we have the privilege of being present at the birth of a new medium. It doesn't feel like the birth because it's been a while, but really, it's early days. And so we're lucky that we get to define a lot of what obvious things will be in the future, roles that will be second nature. But the experience of living that can be unsettling because you feel your identity is pulled in different directions towards stuff that already has a name. And you have to stand your ground a little bit and make sure that you're standing in the right spot that you think is going to turn into something. Similarly, perseverance. Thoreau's first book was, unfortunately, a fiasco. He paid for it to be published, and then the publisher eventually wrote to him saying, Henry, you need to come get this stuff out of my office. He carted it back up to Concord and then wrote to his friend saying, I now have a library of nearly 900 volumes, over 700 of which I wrote myself. But it put him deep into debt, and he had to go to work at his dad's pencil factory. If you've ever used a Conte crayon, then put your hands together for Henry David Thoreau because he invented how to make those. And eventually he pivoted from pencil making to surveying, which at least allowed him to get outside and support himself doing something similar to what he was interested in to begin with. But I mentioned perseverance because there's this kind of pernicious idea that comes from startup world that you should fail quickly. And I've always been a proponent of failing really, really slowly. Because if you aren't in it for the money, you don't know when you've succeeded or if you might succeed. Success doesn't come labeled in any way to distinguish it from failure unless you're in it for the money, and then it's really easy to count your success. But Thoreau was not considered successful in his lifetime. It took 50 years until it was recognized that he's actually better than Emerson and this wonderful ecologist. But the other point about perseverance is you only get a couple of chances to work on something for a really long time. You can pick what it is, but once you pick it, don't abandon it lightly because your life is not that long, and there's no substitute for working on something and just devoting a lot of time to it, even if it doesn't bring you success that you recognize. So the best advice Thoreau ever got was to write stuff down. Emerson told him to keep a journal, and he kept a journal for decades. It was a mix of a personal diary and stuff that he saw on his walks around Concord, scientific observations, and then kind of like a staging ground for his writing that he would strip mine later for his various books. I don't think everybody has to keep a literary journal, but I think writing down what you're working on is something that is irreplaceable. I wish I had done more of it. There's three things about it that are particularly important. The first thing is that your mind just lies to you. Like if you try to remember what you were thinking or what you thought was going to happen at a certain time, your mind just edits that immediately. So the only way to have a true picture of your state of mind when you're working on a project is to write down what you think is going to happen, what you're worrying about, what your plans are. I have this beautiful text document that I wrote when I started Pinboard saying, why is this the right time to do a bookmarking site? What are my expectations? But I couldn't bookmark it anywhere, so I'm still looking for it on my hard drive, and I know it's somewhere there. It's impossible to find it. But I can't wait to read it, because it's going to be a snapshot of my mental state. The second reason to write stuff down is, you actually have to document what you're working on. There's always the stuff that we want to work on and we know we should be working on, and then there's just the stuff that falls, the trivia that kind of creeps into your life. Just like, I don't know, Thor had a little bit of an adversarial view of things. So he saw complexity as an enemy. He also saw trivia as an enemy. If you do think of trivial things, it's going to consume all your day. So when you keep a work diary, you can look over time and see, am I actually working at all on the stuff that's most important to me? For me, the answer is no. So this part of this is to force myself to change that. The third and most important reason for writing stuff down is to capture the details of what you're doing. The only thing that separates me from some high IQ theoretician on a message board telling me I'm doing it wrong is that I've had 4 years of experience, and so I've learned sometimes the easy way, sometimes the hard way, how to do a lot of stuff. And by documenting it, it doesn't disappear. It's such hard-won knowledge that you don't want to just let it go away. Another really nice thing about Thoreau is he talked about money. And he talked about it right away in Walden. The first chapter is about how much it cost him and how much he earned. So he spent, I think, $28 to build his house. And then he made an $8 profit from a bean field over 2 years. He described it as teaching the earth to say beans instead of grass. The guy could write. I love that guy. But the thing that I admired about it is that if you're going to go tell people to live your own life and be independent, you got to talk to them about how they're going to pay for it. Oftentimes, I've fallen into the trap of feeling like money is beneath me. But money is beneath me in the sense that the ground is beneath me. If the money goes away, that's the end of it. So only people who are rich have the luxury of never thinking or talking about money. The rest of us need to be somewhat more blunt about it. I've really benefited from people who publish their costs associated with their projects, especially when they're unexpected. I've also tried to publish my expenses for Pinboard, and I've gotten really great feedback from people who either told me I was being dumb and could save a lot of money, or found it helpful for their projects. And then I went and publishing revenue is scarier, right? But I finally did it at a conference in Poland, and I discovered that nobody cares except the few people who are trying to do a project for whom it was helpful. So I'll go first. I earned $181,000 last year from Pinboard, which is 23,000 times as successful as Henry David Thoreau. Not bad at all. So, in I believe in 1846, Thoreau was sent to jail for failing to pay the poll tax. He didn't pay the poll tax as a protest against the war against Mexico, which he felt was an attempt to extend slavery into the Western territories. And after getting out of jail, he wrote an essay called Resistance to Civil Government, in which he tried to grapple with this question of, when your government is doing something immoral, what is your obligation as a citizen? And what Thoreau came up with is that it's not our job to fix the world. Time is limited, but you can't be a party to it. You can't participate in the injustice. And if the law compels you to participate in the injustice, then you have to break the law, because there's a higher law you listen to. So lately, we've heard some shocking things about our government and the surveillance it's doing of all of our work and everything we do online. To me, scarier and worse than the spying is the machinery of secrecy that has been built around it. very cleverly constructed, so it's impossible to debate or talk in any detail about what's happening. And so it's a crime that if you are forced to cooperate and sell out your users, you can't even say you're doing that, or you risk prison. I think it's come time for us to make a stand as independent developers and say that we're not going to cooperate with that. I was really impressed when I saw LavaBit throw away 10 years of hard work in order to not sell out their users. Yeah. But perversely, you know, they weren't even allowed to say why they were doing it. We all had to infer that, you know, there was some secret gag order. So this, you know, this is kind of monstrous. And I would contend that we can't depend on big companies to make a stand for us. Thoreau wrote, "The rich man is always sold to the institution that makes him rich." You know, the companies have basically said, we have done everything we can within the law, and some have tried hard, but ultimately our hands are tied. Marissa Mayer is not going to go to jail. She has said she thinks it's treason, you know, to reveal this stuff. Larry Page is not going to go to jail. So some brave people are going to have to make a stand, and whoever does, we need to make sure we support them financially, legally, and make enough of a stir that they don't stay in jail for long. I think the reason the secrecy exists is because what it's hiding can't stand the light of day. But it's going to be up to independent people to, you know, to make this decision of conscience. And whether or not you agree with me, I would urge you to read Thoreau's essay and think about if you don't draw the line here, you know, like, do you draw a line, and where do you draw the line? The reason I think this is pressing is because soon it's going to become the new normal. You know, right now, people are shocked, people are surprised, but as time passes, anybody who tries to protest this is going to be branded as naive and, you know, unrealistic, utopian. So we have to act soon. Donuts, much happier topic. You could make a really mean argument about Thoreau. You could say that he was kind of full of it. He built his cabin on land that a friend lent to him. He had a stream of visitors during the 2 years that he was being so self-reliant. Every Sunday, his mom and his sister came out with a basket of pastries and donuts, and he ate them, you know, presumably while watching them wash his socks and make his bed. And even this famous essay on civil disobedience, he wrote it after spending one night in jail. His aunt put on a disguise, showed up in the middle of the night and paid his poll tax, infuriating him, and then paid it every year thereafter, preventing him from, you know, from doing any serious time like he wanted to. I think there's a gentler and friendlier way to look at it. If you're willing to stand on principle, if you're willing to, you know, live a life outside the margins of the ordinary, and really push your experiment, maybe sometimes someone will show up and bring you a basket of donuts. And it's okay to eat the donuts. They're really, really good. And, you know, don't feel bad about it. Thoreau said about his experience at Walden this: "I learned this, at least by my experiment, that if one advances confidently in the direction of his dreams, he will meet with a success unexpected in common hours." You have to remember, Thoreau never succeeded in life by any normal measure. He's talking about a greater success. And it's a success that I wish for all of you. It's a success I really wish for myself. But I want to leave you with the most important lesson. If you only retain one thing from reading Thoreau, it should be this: go outside. It's lunchtime. Thank you very, very much. Portland is beautiful.